So, 9 years ago, after I recovered from fibromyalgia, I published these 5 ebooks, and I realised that writing down how that happened was in itself a cathartic process. It was part of the recovery. When I first published the books, I had a backlash of negativity from some people within the fibromyalgia community, including a couple of doctors and a therapist accusing me of being fake by saying that fibromyalgia is a lifelong condition and that it's not possible to recover, and that I must be lying. Now, I'm not ashamed to say that my reaction to this was one of hurt and anger, and I thought, how dare you say I'm not recovered, or indeed that I didn't have fibromyalgia in the first place, or that I'm a liar, because only I know my own truth. So it's a strange phenomena, this energy around fibromyalgia, and one which I've had the honour of discussing with Dan Nufa, who, I don't know if I pronounced your name right, Dan, actually, Nufa, of CFS Unravelled. He does some brilliant work through his website, and he's collected lots of examples of people that have suffered from chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, and it's an amazing thing, and it proves that recovery is possible. So, although I wanted to help people recover, I really didn't know how to, because I didn't want to get sucked into fibromyalgia taking over my life again. And because a part of me has had to recover and step away from the illness in order to stay healthy and get on with my life. So since recovering, amongst other things, I've visited the Himalayas, I've taught English in China, I've completed a master's degree, and anyone who has ever suffered from fibrofog will understand what a challenge that might have been. But I also wrote these books, which was equally a challenge because I was researching them and writing them while recovering at the same time. Last year I also started to work with the University of Bedfordshire toward developing a lifestyle fibromyalgia mobile health app based on the 7 healing principles that I use to recover, and the plan I set out as a guide in volume 5 of the ebooks. I also wrote all the books under a pen name. So I was adopted at birth, and it was in fact the name of my birthright. Now, I used a pen name because when I was writing, I had to distance myself from the part of me that had been ill, and as a framework to somehow transfer the memory of that being ill to a named part of me that I could leave in the past. And I hope you have some resonance with that notion. Every time I experienced external negativity, it reminded me of having fibromyalgia, and memories have a very strong hold on the narrative of our future lives. Before I published these 5 smaller ebook volumes of Elizabeth McSweeney, Fibromyalgia Road to Recovery, I had published it as one long volume and received a particularly vitriolic negative review from an American therapist who kept emailing me and complained online because she had read the whole lot, that I hadn't explained in a nutshell easily in the first chapter how she could help her patients recover. She had promised her patients a recovery, and I hadn't given her a magic pill, and she had lost face professionally and blamed me. I did take on board that it was far too long a tome to read in one go, hence creating 5 smaller volumes. But I also realised then that medical professionals, however well-intentioned, have no right to tell their patients that they can cure them, or indeed the opposite. They have no right to tell someone that they have suffered from an incurable condition. The truth is that all they can honestly say is that they don't have a cure to offer at that time. The truth is, your path of recovery is yours to find, and it will be your journey. My advice is avoid family, colleagues and health professionals who cannot help you, and embrace the strangers around you who can. Support for recovery from fibromyalgia, even in the UK, where we still have this wonderful NHS service, just about, is not available free, and it doesn't happen overnight. And the framework for diagnosis and treatment is the same as it was, more or less, 9 years ago when I wrote about it in volume 2 of the Road to Recovery books. However, this may be about to change, and this is one of the reasons I've decided to use 2020 to engage with people who are suffering from the symptoms of fibromyalgia and who are looking for help and who are intent on making this the year of recovery. So here I am 9 years later, fibre-free, medication-free and living life. Now, I won't deny that I've had a couple of scares or flares in those 11 years, maybe 2 or 3 max, but as soon as I recognised them for what they were, all the symptoms disappeared within hours. Now, I've started to work with people within the medical cannabis sector, and we're launching a Green Lotus range of retail CBD products that will be available this year, and this work has re-inspired me to help those of you who are still suffering from this soul-destroying condition. There is a lot of anecdotal evidence of people using CBD and cannabis to help with their fibromyalgia symptoms, including pain, inflammation, IBS and insomnia here in the UK. But we can't make claims to any particular products without a pharmaceutical marketing license. But if this has a resonance with you, please do get in touch. If you'd like to know more, my email address is elizabethmcsweeney@hotmail.co.uk. That's elizabethmcsweeney@hotmail.co.uk. So this year will mark a special anniversary for me. It was 12 years ago that I first made an absolute determination to recover from the condition known as fibromyalgia. It had gotten me so low that I'd previously attempted suicide and thank goodness failed and lived to tell the tale. And I think it was sheer anger with the situation that made me determined to find what I needed to kickstart my journey towards recovery. This point of departure, this research was also the point of departure for writing and publishing the 5 volumes. So you can find Elizabeth McSweeney, Fibromyalgia, Road to Recovery, 5 volumes on Amazon. So for those of you who haven't yet downloaded or read them, there's a link below the video, but don't worry because I'm going to chat through a few of the most salient points here as we go. There are basically 5 volumes. One being an introduction to fibromyalgia, which is really useful for friends and family of people who've just been diagnosed. It's very UK-centric look at that introduction, but it can help you wherever you are in the globe. It explains what it is compared to other similar illnesses, what it's not, how it's diagnosed, and my understanding that it is in fact trauma-related. Volume 2 details how to deal with pain, pain medications, pain management, and again based very much on the UK NHS treatment framework for pain management. Critically in Volume 2, I also explain the role of insomnia and that overcoming this is a crucial key in the recovery process. So when I first wrote Road to Recovery, I didn't mention the roles of the UK welfare system or the roles that family and friends take in actually keeping us ill. Yes, you did hear that correctly. The roles of the UK welfare system and the roles that your family and friends unknowingly take in actually keeping you ill. But I was asked to discuss these matters by a member of the UK Fibromyalgia Association in Somerset, so I dedicated a whole volume to them. And Volume 3 discusses this in complete comprehensive detail. These 2 issues. In Volume 4 is the biggie. It's got masses of cited research papers about all the things that can help support us on a journey of full recovery: treatments, therapies, diets, vitamins, minerals, details of alkaline diets, and the importance of gentle, persistent pacing exercises. And finally, based on all that knowledge and my own experiences, I didn't just want to talk about symptom management, but the 7 healing principles and the framework I use to recover, explained in 5 volumes. And this is deep, deep healing on a soul level. So today I'm going to start at the beginning, or we're going to start at the beginning, because you're here with me. My journey started in 2008 with a lot of desk research and with the help of Fibromyalgia Association UK, who published a questionnaire on my behalf which helped me to gather important primary research data and involve many different people in giving their experiences in my books. In fact, I quote 35 of them in the books. Pam Stewart, who was then the chair of Fibromyalgia UK, wrote a lovely commendation of my work, saying that some of the chapters would be particularly useful for medical professionals and decision makers because I'd managed to pull together in one place a mass of research and data. Now, bearing in mind this was 2009, nowadays, of course, I'd have probably just put a blog online and put all the information out there on a website, which I may well do, but it's very, very time consuming, and I want everybody to be able to move on really to where I am now, so I can help you all recover in the quickest way. And Sue Coots, who was the then coordinator of Bridgewater Fibromyalgia Support Group, enjoyed how I explained all the technical stuff in language that can be easily explained. Now, that's not patronising. That is because if you have fibromyalgia, you probably suffer from fibrofog, and technical, academic, medical detail is quite, it's hard on the brain when you have fibrofog. In fact, I was recovering when I wrote these books, so it really was a labour of love. And that sort of signifies my love for you, because my love for other people, I really want you to be able to recover like I did. So before moving on to the text in the book, I want to look inside the book cover at the acknowledgements I wrote at that time, because a great part of living with the notion of recovery is gratitude. It's very, very difficult to feel grateful, and in the moment when we have chronic fatigue or when we're suffering from pain. So I wrote inside the book some acknowledgements, giving thanks to all those people that are involved, particularly with the UK Fibromyalgia associations and the charities, for their continued hard work in bringing awareness about the condition to professionals and publics alike. And the public alike. There was my GP I thanked, who first suggested I wrote a book about coping, because his suggestion became a part not just of articulating how to cope and how to manage the condition, but it was in itself a cathartic process that led directly to discovering the path to my recovery. Now, this is important because first I had listened to someone's suggestion outside of myself, and this in turn had opened a universal door for me. And I accepted that. I'm going to say that again because it is important. First, I had listened to someone's suggestion or offering from outside myself, and accepting this in turn had opened a universal door for me. And I'm hoping that my work will act as a doorway for you. I also thanked two friends for their very practical support over the years when I needed it, and I thanked the 35 people who themselves were suffering from fibromyalgia and who contributed to these books with their own experiences and tips for coping. The reason for these videos is not to read you the books, because you're perfectly capable of reading them yourself, but to give some retrospective knowledge and a bit of information on the way, and keep you focused on the condition or illness, but on the techniques and process and roadmap that will help you recover. So the point of these audios is to keep you focused, not on the condition or illness, but on the techniques and the processes and the roadmap that will help you recover. There is a term of reference in the front cover that I'd like to discuss in more detail, because although I wrote it, I don't agree with it anymore. So I wrote, although fibromyalgia is not an adequate label to describe the complex physiology of the condition, I decided not to use the word syndrome. Now, I still stand by that because the term is all-embracing. I abbreviated academic references to capital F, little m, FM, and colloquial references to fibro. Now, it will help you today if you understand why I did this. Words have power. They are like spells. We know this because even great religious and spiritual texts begin with the phrase, "First there was a word." Your own road to recovery will be a spiritual path of absolute deep healing in the depth of your soul, and the words that you use will become like incantations when repeated and processed inside your brain. Now, that doesn't mean that you can just use a simple spell or incantation to get better. That would be nonsense. But it is a caution to use positive language. Through the 5 volumes of the books Elizabeth McSweeney Road to Fibromyalgia, Road to Recovery, I use the term us fibros. Now, this is the phrase that I really now would like to eradicate from my books. So I use the term us fibros, even though I considered myself at that time to be fully recovered. And it's this term that I particularly dislike, and if you like, I am denouncing it now, because words are powerful. So if there's anyone out there who would like to retype my books, omitting and replacing this term, do get in touch, because that would be a great healing service to many. Why? Well, because words have power. And I use the phrase us fibros as a way of positioning myself with you, alongside you, showing you that I understand, that I've been where you are now. That's good, right? And I've heard this phrase used over and over again on forums and in support networks, and this is where I picked it up from. All the self-help groups, the forums, the discussion groups and the networks. However, it is ludicrousy. It is ludicrous. Lunacy. Lunacy. It's lunacy. Ludicrous. Ludicrousy is not a word, is it? It's ludicrous, and it is lunacy. Because, as I challenge later on in the books, this identifying oneself as an illness prevents recovery. Let me say that again. This identifying yourself as an illness prevents your recovery. This doesn't mean that the illness is psychosomatic or in your mind, but the power of mind is preventing your recovery in the most insidious way, because you have identified yourself as an illness, and in so doing, you have let it completely take over your whole identity. Does that have some resonance? I hope it does. Chronic pain is undisputably debilitating, but we're more than our pain. And to illustrate how ludicrous? Yes, ludicrous. What lunacy is this? Ludicrous. Let me ask you, for example, if you have a verruca, do you describe yourself as one? Do you say, well, us verrucas, as if it's a private club or a badge of honour? No. Have you ever met a cancer patient undergoing treatment, or a Macmillan nurse, for example, telling them to describe themselves as a cancer? No, of course not. No one says us cancers. There are periods in history where people have been outcast and excluded by society, for example, lepers, and these kinds of taboos were directly associated with belief systems that those illnesses were not recoverable from. Well, at the time they weren't, but now they are. So nothing is, remains the same. So if you use the phrase, even in a camaraderie way, a form of inclusion into a support group, as us fibros, if you do that, stop it now. Every time you say it, you are telling your brain and others that you are fibromyalgia. And in telling your brain this repeatedly and exclusively, your whole identity becomes swallowed by a temporary condition of suffering. You are not fibromyalgia. You are you. There's a whole lot more to you than the illness that you're suffering from temporarily at the moment. There's a whole lot more to you than pain and suffering. Now is the time to be brave. Now is the time to listen to that voice in your head that tells you you can break away from that narrative and take your first steps towards your own recovery. Now, I'm not going to use this time today to read your volumes of the book, because I really want to focus on this concept that it's very important not to listen to negative voices around you, even other people that are suffering, your families, your friends, very well-meaning people, but actually to listen to your own inner voice. Okay, I don't need to read verbatim volume 1, but this is the book I'm focusing on at the moment today. It is available on Amazon, and let's face it, it's literally a couple of quid or a couple of dollars, and it's going to take a whole lot more resources than that to facilitate your decision today to take your first steps on your journey towards full recovery. I was lucky enough that I did receive some disability allowance, and I used that towards paying for my recovery. And I had a wonderful homeopath, so I took a homeopathic journey. I used, for example, a process called EMDR for post-traumatic stress. I changed my diet, went on a strict alkaline diet. I acidified my cells. I did all sorts of things, and I point this whole process and framework out in the 5 books. But I really want to get across today that it is a spiritual, deep healing journey. In effect, fibromyalgia illness itself is a process of healing. It's a process from healing from the causes that created the condition in the first place. And that's probably crucial to understand. So I've already discussed the poignant notion, what's in a label, labelling oneself, what's in the label, what does it mean, what is it? And obviously the book details the symptoms and the diagnostic pathway and the salient points of conventional prognosis in much, much more detail. But I will come back to discuss some underlying causes later. So first I want to revisit the preface, is that how you say it? Preface, which forms the introduction to each volume. So, unfortunately on Amazon, when you look at the volumes, the first pages, they're all the same, because I felt this was such an important part of information that I put it in the preface, and that's the only bit you can see. And here I am banging on about it again. So that is how important I think this information is. So the preface forms the introduction to each of the 5 volumes, and several people, including the 35 people I mentioned earlier, wrote to me about how their inner hope has been maintained through, for example, their Christian faith. Now, I'm a Buddhist, and this helps me to understand deeper underlying causal effects manifest as the symptoms of fibromyalgia in my life. It helped me to theoretically understand it, and then I had to live it and really understand it in order to heal. So I discussed the causes that bring about fibromyalgia in comprehensive detail in chapter 4 of volume 1 of the books, which you can download and read in your own time. I'm going to talk more about chapter 4 of volume 1 right now. So it was in a little while, but it was indeed faith that gave me the power to recover. Now, the power is not attached to any particular religious framework. It is simply a knowing and an accepting that people who cast a life sentence upon you by stating that fibromyalgia is for life are wrong. It also means that if I've heard people say this, oh, there will be a cure one day, but not in my lifetime, then you're giving yourself a life sentence of pain and suffering, because there are lots of people working to help you recover, and I'm just one of those people. So it doesn't mean that it's in your mind, or that you can wake up one day feeling better just like magic, and it also doesn't undermine all the hard work by networks of people in the country here in the UK who have tirelessly lobbied government until they accepted that fibromyalgia be classed officially as a disability. And this is really helpful in employment rights, and particularly in Department of Work and Pension claims. And this acceptance of it officially as a disability is something we can actually express gratitude for. But this acceptance of it as an official disability does not mean that it is permanent or for life, or you can't recover from it. So, people who cast a life sentence upon you by stating that fibromyalgia is for life are wrong. Now I can state this because my symptoms, my condition was so bad that for 3 years I had to have a disability blue badge. That's a badge you put in a car here in the UK which allows you to park in disabled parking in order to get closer to shops and services. However, I don't have one now and I don't need one anymore. So, part of my own journey through recovery was found in understanding the actual causes of the condition in the first place. Chapter 4 in Volume 1 cites a lot of medical research and jargon, which if you have fibrofog will mean that you will need to work through it at your own pace. There's no point me reading it to you. You will need to work through it at your own pace. That's why it's there. In Chapter 2 of Volume 1, I quoted 4 people's descriptions of their own fibromyalgia as a reaction to shock, a central nervous system oversensitivity, a response to the central nervous system to stress and trauma, and as an adrenal failure to total exhaustion. Those 4 bullet points I'm quoting from other people. It's how people described the condition: a reaction to shock, a central nervous system oversensitivity, a response by the central nervous system to stress and trauma, and as adrenal failure or total exhaustion. Now, this last description is physiologically incorrect, but a fantastic analogy of how a flare-up is experienced and why fibromyalgia is often mistaken as chronic fatigue syndrome and vice versa. Now, CFS and fibromyalgia are very similar, but they are also different. But that doesn't mean that actually the process of recovering from both can be very similar. What I would say probably is that chronic fatigue is more of that total exhaustion and adrenal failure feeling, and that fibromyalgia is more of experiencing more physical pain. And obviously chronic pain is exhausting. So in Chapter 4 of Volume 1, I explain in more detail the role of stress, or fight or flight, and how our bodies physically respond to external stresses, and the role external stresses play in manifesting states of chronic pain and exhaustion. Now, even quoting UK parliamentary debates in those chapters. I cite reference to the work of a number of doctors and researchers, and also the letters I received, including the 35 people mentioned above, all of which led me through this research to understand the roles of trauma and post-traumatic stress in fibromyalgia. People with fibromyalgia have often experienced multiple consecutive traumas, myself included: physical traumas, for example, such as head injuries, road traffic accidents; situational trauma such as domestic violence; abuse such as violence and rape; death, grieving, and experiencing multiple consecutive traumas, physical, emotional, and psychological and spiritual, and therefore have been unable to physically heal or process that grief in a healing way. And it gets trapped in the body. The pain gets trapped in the body. Again, not saying it's in the mind, not saying it's somatic, it's not psychosomatic. That is something I definitely disagree with. I read that sometimes in research and I totally disagree with it. I think that what's happened is consecutive multiple traumas before a person can go through the appropriate healing processes from one to the other, and physiologically we get overwhelmed and can't process that pain, and then it becomes a neurological feedback. So that recovery from trauma or post-traumatic stress we can add as another key to recovery, the first being overcoming insomnia that I mentioned earlier. So there are many keys. It's a holistic approach to recovery. Recovering from fibromyalgia may seem like a miracle because it's an act of faith. Now, this doesn't mean the condition is psychosomatic. I really, really can't repeat that enough. I really want to stress that. I want you to look at it the other way around. It means that your mind is preventing you from recovering by believing that your condition is permanent. There is nothing in life that is permanent. Everything is constantly changing, and some of the issues surrounding negative prognosis and experiences of fibromyalgia will be dealt with later on in the series, as it is throughout all of the ebooks. So let's focus on the positive. We've already found 2 keys that will help you on your journey to full recovery: overcoming insomnia and healing past traumas. So I detail the steps in all 5 volumes of the ebooks about how to do this. But the purpose of these videos is to keep you focused not on your current illness, but on your future wellness. Okay, stay focused not on your current illness, but on your future wellness. We will be launching also in 2020, that is my company Green Lotus, will be launching some wellness products with CBD in. And they may well be able to help you on your journey. But the purpose of these audio recordings today is to bring your focus back to not focusing on your physicality, but on your spirituality. The power which enables the universe to offer doors to your recovery is your own faith. Hope is hoping that someone external to you will offer you a cure. Faith is knowing that recovery from fibromyalgia is in fact itself a deep, deep healing process. Hope is hoping that a door will appear. Faith is actually mustering the courage to go through it. I'm going to say that again. I want you to really take this on board. The power, the innate power that you have, which enables the universe to offer doors to your recovery, is your own faith. Hope is hoping that someone external to you will offer you a cure, a magic pill. But faith is knowing that recovery from fibromyalgia is in fact itself a deep, deep healing process. Actually, it's knowing that fibromyalgia itself is the healing process, and what you are healing is all of the things that have caused your body the pain in the first place, and your mind and your spirit. Fibromyalgia is not sickness, it is in itself a healing journey. There are many people who are working at this very moment in the universe to help you recover, and I'm just one of those people. So I hope that you will join me next week when we look at volume 2 of the series in the Elizabeth McSweeney Fibromyalgia books. If you want to download the first volume and read that this week, or if you want to download volume 2 so you're one step ahead of me, that would be great. If you don't feel like doing that, that's also great. Join me next week and stay focused. Lots of love, and bye for now.